Welcome to Fantasy Football Live, presented by Ram Trucks. For the 19th year, we are here, and we will be here every single Sunday from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern every week to help you get your last-second fantasy decisions made. We'll walk you through some of the what should we do's. You guys can be part of the conversation. All you got to do is use the hashtag AskFFL. You want to hear from the experts, and we've got some of the best. Tera Roberts, she's here breaking it down. Matt Harmon, Andy Behrens, I'm Jason Fitz. And before we get to anything, let's just acknowledge it's the first Sunday of the season, and y'all, it has already been absolute, total, complete chaos. Dak Prescott gets a massive contract extension, 4 years, $240 million, making him the highest paid player in NFL history with, according to reports, $231 million in guarantees, making him the highest guaranteed money player above Deshaun Watson. So massive money handed out. And then also of significance, Tyreek Hill this morning. It was not a normal morning for him getting to the stadium. As Adam Schefter tweets out, Dolphins wide receiver Tyreek Hill was detained by police today, entering the stadium for a driving violation per his agent Drew Rosenhaus. Rosenhaus said Hill will play today. They interviewed him on the field. He was very sweaty. I think that's all anxiety for this. I know we got a lot to get to, guys, but quick on this Tyreek Hill thing. Matt Harmon, how worried should somebody like me that has Tyreek Hill in every one of his leagues be about worried about the fact he was arrested this morning?
I don't know. Didn't we see recently, a few months ago, Scotty Scheffler gets arrested going to have a day at the golf course and ends up putting on an electric performance? I feel like that's what we're going to get from Tyreek Hill. Fitz, I actually would spin this positive. If you have Tyreek Hill in your fantasy team, is he not about to go? Is this like a pseudo revenge game, right? He's arrested this morning. Revenge game then now applies to this situation. I think you could calculate it that way. I didn't expect to be doing these sort of tabulations and analysis right here ahead of week one, but I think that's where we're at this point.
It's a modern NFL that we're sitting here looking at. Like, I'm still trying to figure out what kind of traffic violation one of the superstars of the Dolphins has on the way to the stadium. You would think that there are escorts galore. Like when Andy Behrens comes to set every day, doesn't somebody just escort you there so that the security all knows?
Absolutely. I've got security. I've got people ushering me in and out. This would never happen at Yahoo. This is an amateur hour they're running in Miami. Yeah, that was almost a humble brag that you actually have Tyreek Hill on every roster. That's not going to be a problem over the full season.
Well, that's because I'm a champion. Let's remember, it took me, 2 minutes to remind you guys that last season I won our contest that will be back this season. Tera, I would like you to know that maybe that was beginner's luck, so there's a little pressure on you. Later on, we will do our draft. We'll explain it. But as the defending champion, I'm hoping that you can continue the tradition of making the show smarter, because I think you and I are, that's what we're here to do.
Absolutely. I got your back. It's going to be fun.
Look at that. Tera's being ever the professional. I'm being ever the non-professional. All right, let's take a look at some of the actives, inactives, because this is going to have a huge impact on everybody as we start the season. Some of these names we expect: Keenan Allen active, Jamar Chase active, T. Higgins inactive, but maybe the most significant to many people, Russell Wilson with that calf this morning. The Steelers decided he will not be active, which means Justin Fields will start. So, Andy Behrens, any thoughts on Justin Fields now being the starting quarterback, at least this week, for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yeah, he's immediately fantasy relevant. I mean, we've gone through this with Justin Fields before, right? The significant rushing upside here means that in pretty much any week in which he's starting, he's a top 10 fantasy option. I've got him as my QB 10 right now, and that actually feels a little bit conservative. But he's also one of those guys where, like, this is good for Justin Fields, and it is good for the opposing defense, because we also know that Justin is probably going to take 5 or 6 sacks. He's prone to giving the ball away. So does this change the math for skill players on the Steelers? I don't think so, but that's more a reflection of my lack of confidence in Russell Wilson at this stage than it is my total confidence in Justin.
I'm going to be honest. I may or may not have paid for a little vacation this year on the Justin Fields over rushing. I mean, that just felt like that hit every week. Vegas was wrong on it every single time. Also, of note on the actives, inactives, Tyler Lockett questionable but expected to play. Christian McCaffrey also questionable. Tera, any concerns on either of these players?
No, especially not on Christian McCaffrey. They said he's good to go. They're just being cautious. We don't expect any limitations. We did get those limitations on snap count kind of announced there for Brandon Ayuk. So the fact that we got that and nothing for Christian McCaffrey means we're feeling confident. He's going to get his same compliment. They just were being official with the injury status, so no concerns for Christian McCaffrey. Tyler Lockett is kind of interesting because he's been dealing with it, but on top of that, we have to push for JSN. So I think maybe Tyler Lockett does affect me a little bit more in terms of thinking I'm just going to stick him on the bench and not really risk it this week with him.
Speaking of target share, let's get to some of our top fantasy storylines for week 1. You guys want to know what's on everybody's mind as we get ready for the matchups. Matt Harmon, I know as the wide receiver expert on this show, you're thinking wide receivers. What's on your mind?
Yeah, of course. I'm not going to come in here and talk about some tight ends or running backs or any of that. We're talking about wide receiver, the glamour position. And what I've got my eye on is definitely in this matchup between the Colts and the Texans. And hey, the AFC South, suddenly one of the most exciting divisions in football. These two teams, a big reason because of that with their two young second-year quarterbacks. We know that CJ Stroud is great, you know, and all of that. He diced up the Colts in each of the 2 games last year. I'm just curious how the target share is going to get distributed. Playing time is going to get distributed here between these wide receivers, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, and Tank Dell. Now, my confidence level is pretty high that Stephon Diggs is going to file in here in some type of way. He's going to be a serious target earner here. The other thing I'm confident in is that Nico Collins is the number 1 on this team. Nico Collins was, again, electric in both the matchups with the Colts last year. 146 yards and a touchdown in week 2. Week 18, 195 yards and a touchdown. He is the X receiver. He's almost never going to come off the field. So that sort of comes back to then Diggs and Dell. Who's playing the slot more? Who's running more routes on CJ Stroud's dropbacks? I think that is a pretty big storyline here this week. I'm starting all 3 of these guys this week, but we're definitely going to learn a lot of information here in week 1.
Yeah, it's amazing to see Houston be in these conversations because they've gotten that good that fast. Tera, your top fantasy storyline heading into the week is...
I am staying on the Houston train here, but while Matt's got his eyes on the wide receivers, I have my eyes on the quarterbacks here, particularly the battle here between CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson. We've got 2 superstar second-year quarterbacks being drafted back-to-back in ADP with second-year head coaches, both teams with very high expectations here. But with all the similarities, they're in 2 very different situations here. We've got Stroud coming off of the Offensive Rookie of the Year award, finished as QB10 in average points per game last season, led one of the most dramatic turnarounds in franchise history there to lead his team to the playoffs. One of the most stacked receiving corps Matt talked about in the entire league with the addition of Stephon Diggs. He's truly got an impressive resume coming into this year. And then when you look at Anthony Richardson, we were drafting him really on a lot of hope. We had faith in actual know-how with CJ Stroud, and with Anthony Richardson, we're kind of looking at the ceiling here with him. We're basing everything off of about 2.5 games here for him from last year. And they were glorious from a fantasy perspective. But there's a big unknown factor here. And it'll be interesting to see how these guys match up directly here. I think it's a really good storyline that maybe overlooked a little bit.
I do love Shane Steichen and I do love Anthony Richardson, but you make a great point. Didn't have a lot of film coming into the pros. Didn't get a lot of film in his first year. So let's see what that looks like. Andy Behrens, what's on your mind as the top storyline for week 1?
Yeah, I'm looking at a receiving core as well, and I'm looking at Buffalo. Listen, Josh Allen is the consensus QB1 in fantasy, yet none of his wide receivers ranked inside the top 50 at their position to enter the season. So Buffalo's receiving core to me, far and away, one of the most interesting and fantasy relevant in the league. We don't really yet know the hierarchy, and we can't say who's lining up where, but the quarterback has averaged 4,400 yards and 34 touchdown passes per year over the last 4 seasons. We know that there are over 240 targets unaccounted for after the departures of Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. Everybody here is a sleeper, right? Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, rookie Keon Coleman. Everyone also kind of profiles best as a slot receiver, but we can't have 4 of those on the field. It doesn't work. We're probably going to see a little Mac Hollins today as well, perhaps ahead of Keon Coleman. It's just absolutely wide open, but we know that 1 or 2 of these guys is going to be just dead on a right answer in fantasy.
I just love the idea of Canadian Football League sort of lineup where you have 4 guys in the slot. You don't know who's going where. Okay. I love the wide receiver conversation, and it brings me to my top fantasy storyline because you mentioned Keon Coleman. Well, really, this is all about rookies. Every year we talk about the rookie wide receiver class, and then we expect some level of impact. And what you saw from Xavier Worthy on Thursday night reminds us that there's no longer a learning curve when it comes to wide receivers and the expectations that they have. Like we saw the first catch be a touchdown. You see 2 catches, 68 yards, 2 touchdowns, 19.8 points. I had Xavier Worthy in one of my leagues. I think a lot of people took him because you knew he was going to get a ton of targets, but it has me thinking about some of the other rookies out there, like Malik Neighbors. There's not going to be some grace and patience while we look for Malik to develop. You can even say the same thing about Roma Dunze. More and more, I think we have to look at these guys and watch more college tape on guys to know coming into their rookie year that there's an expectation that they're not just good, that they're impactful from week 1. This isn't the NFL of 5 years ago where they had time to get used to it. I think that's a huge storyline. All right, time to have a little bit of fun as we lock it in. And what I mean by lock it in is somebody that's got a rough matchup, but we don't care. We still think they're going to deliver. No matter what, we are locking them in. Tera, give me some of the, no matter the matchup this weekend, you're ready to lock them in.
Oh, I'm locking it in with Kyler Murray versus Buffalo. Buffalo's defense in 2023, it wasn't the same vaunted Buffalo defense that we had, grown to know and fear over the years, but a lot of that was due to injury. They're coming in healthy here, and they have one of the stronger pass defenses in the NFL. Do not let that stop you from starting Kyler Murray. He is still a top 10 quarterback, despite coming off the ACL injury mid-season. Kyler Murray was QB9 in average points per game on the season. So keep in mind, that was the majority of the season that he played without a wide receiver 1. Hollywood Brown got injured very shortly after his return. Trey McBride was fantastic, but not having a wide receiver 1 is pretty significant. Now we've got Marvin Harrison Jr. coming in. I am pumped about Kyler Murray. I'm not letting the matchup keep me away from Kyler Murray this week. We're leaning in. We're locking it in.
Especially as bad as that Cardinals defense is, Kyler's going to have to score a lot of points. Matt Harmon, give us who you're ready to lock in.
I'll go with someone in that wide receiver 3 range. I'll talk about New Panthers wide receiver Deontay Johnson, who faces the New Orleans Saints. For all of the other, we'll say, flaws, weirdness, kind of holes on the roster for the New Orleans Saints, they are annually a really good defense under Dennis Allen, especially in the secondary, where they were 6th in dropback success rate allowed last year, top 10 in EPA allowed through the air as well. They also play a lot of man coverage, 5th highest rate of man coverage in the league per fantasy points data. But Deontay Johnson, who again is a new arrival here in Carolina, he has always been both an excellent separator in reception perception against man coverage. He's also been super productive against man coverage in his career, even with poor quarterback play. So yeah, it's a question mark. How good is Bryce Young? But I do think this offense under Dave Canales is going to use Deontay Johnson in multiple ways. He's going to be the focal point of the passing tree. He's probably going to clear a 25% target share on pretty much every single week. So if you're looking for kind of that high floor wide receiver 3 play, I wouldn't let the matchup against a strong New Orleans secondary deter me from throwing Johnson out there.
And Behrens, who you got to lock it in?
Yeah, I've been spending much of my week trying to give myself a pep talk on DK Metcalf versus Patrick Surtain. This should really be one of the more entertaining individual matchups of opening week. These two have met one time back in 2022, and Surtain traveled with Metcalf a fair amount. We'd probably have to give Surtain the nod in that individual battle because Metcalf finished with only 36 yards. However, and this is why I'm not fading DK on Sunday, it's not as if Geno Smith was avoiding his top wide receiver. Metcalf was targeted 7 times. He caught them all. He also drew a flag in that game. I'd be more than a little bit worried about Metcalf if he didn't still see volume in the prior meeting with Surtain. But they aren't going to avoid him. And DK is just he's such a rare athlete and easily the most dangerous playmaker for the Seahawks. I don't see how they can completely avoid him in the offense. I'm also optimistic that Seattle is just going to play at a very different pace this year under a new coaching staff. Last season, they ranked dead last in the league in plays per game. So if you want to sit DK for another upper tier wide receiver, fine. I get it. It is a tough matchup, but don't bench him in favor of some random dude that you added from the wire this morning.
This is where Andy and Tera get to take a little water break. You get to go to the bench. You get to hang out, and Matt Harmon and I get to slow dance because it is time for Make Your Pick, where we look at some tough decisions with multiple players submitted by you, amazing people. You've given us the questions. Harmon and I will be imagining careless whisper in the back of our head. So let's get the first question going on here as we dance. We'll say it's from Sassy, just because I wanted to be sassy. Full PPR running back and Flex Stevenson, Ford, Zamir White. What do you think there, Matt Harmon?
All right, yeah, hand on the hip here, Fitz. We're going dancing on this one. And I think our first true move here we're making here, the first kind of pivot, is we're going Ramondre Stevenson for the running back spot. I know there's a lot of consternation, a lot of worries about this New England Patriots offense, particularly the offensive line, but Stevenson is a good back. They committed to him in the offseason. RB2, Antonio Gibson, is also dealing with an injury. And, man, the Bengals were dreadful stopping the run last year, and they did not get any better in the offseason from a personnel perspective. So he's the easy pick. I think for the second slot here, I'm going to go with Jerome Ford. This one's a little less confident for me, but I do think in a PPR setting, he's probably projected for a little more targets than a Zamir White. I'm kind of in wait-and-see mode with what Zamir White's role is right now.
You're not getting a kiss at the end of that, Dan, since you didn't take Zamir. All right, next up on the questions, ePaul6 comes in and says, need to fill my third wide receiver spot and flex with 2 of Spears, Odunze, Deontay, Dobbins, Keon Coleman. I've got Josh Allen, half PPR. What do you think?
Well, I think I would be a big old hypocrite if I didn't say you got to start Deontay Johnson here, considering what I just said in the last segment. So he is definitely one pick. I think the others are really up in the air here. Rome Odunze would probably be the guy I would go with from a flex perspective, but it's close with J.K. Dobbins, who, again, I just don't know what either the Titans or Chargers running backs, like what the rooms are going to look like. I mean, Spears probably projects to be the number 2 back. Dobbins, I wouldn't expect to have a full workload either yet at this point. And Coleman, I mean, again, Andy said it a couple segments ago, there's a real chance he runs behind Mac Hollins just because he's a rookie, veteran deference, and Hollins projects as the X receiver. So Johnson's the only clear-cut answer here to me.
All right, let's pull the next one up from YMIACPA, which I'm going to say is you make your clock. The hashtag make your pick. Gonna face this every week for touchdown potential. Thank you. Feel like I need to get Montgomery in, but that means sitting Dell, Mixon, or Kamara. What do you think?
Yeah, man. I do think you got to get David Montgomery in here. And I think if you're sitting one of the other guys, because all of these are really good players, just on the David Montgomery point, the Rams lost Aaron Donald in the offseason. Don't know if you remember Aaron Donald, but he's probably one of the best players to ever put the pads on. Probably going to make a pretty big impact there. And Jahmyr Gibbs coming off of an offseason injury or a preseason injury. So Montgomery projects for a really good workload. I want to start him. I think if I'm benching somebody here in favor of him, I probably would sit down Alvin Kamara just because it's the Saints offense. They certainly project for less points on a weekly basis than the Houston Texans here, who Mixon and Dell play for.
We finally get a normal name on a tweet for the next one. Teresa Platts asking, thank you, Teresa, for just having an easy name. Need to. Christian Kirk, Chuba Hubbard, George Pickens got killed by opponent playing Jaden Reed. I feel that all the way to my bones. What should she do?
Love that context here because, number one, we're going to play Chuba Hubbard because, again, not a great matchup against the Saints, but he's going to project for a solid baseline of touches. A guy that's most likely going to lead his running back room in touches. You got to throw him out there, especially behind an improved offensive line. And this context with Jaden Reed crushing you on Friday night, shout out to Jaden Reed, what a player, is going to lead me to go towards George Pickens here because we're looking for that high ceiling. Pickens possesses that high ceiling for your other spot over a Christian Kirk. I get it. Kirk is probably a little bit more entrenched with his quarterback, and Justin Fields is an unknown. But Pickens can make your week with a couple of plays, just like Jaden Reed did for your opponent this week.
All right, Harmon, great work by you. Now we get to hit the bench, get a little bit of water. And in the meantime, that means that Andy and Tara are going to tell us that sometimes numbers do lie. Take it away, y'all.
Yeah, even though we're playing a game that is entirely reliant on NFL numbers, it's probably worth pointing out that they do, in fact, lie from time to time. It's been known to happen. So we're going to tell you about a few stats that don't tell a full story about what's probably going to happen in 2024. Tara, start us off. Give us a Lion number.
I thought that I would start us off with a defensive stat. I thought that would be a little bit fun, a defensive fantasy stat. It is 13.24, the average fantasy points per game allowed by Carolina to opposing quarterbacks. They were a very, very fearsome group against quarterbacks and opposing wide receivers last year. That number doesn't exist anymore. Poof, it's gone. The number belonged to a team that had Brian Behrens. Carolina attempted to fill that giant hole in their defense, but you just can't replace him like that. It's not easy. And while Carolina's secondary is talented with no pass rush, quarterbacks are going to be able to sit in the pocket and pick it apart. Even Derek Carr, Last year, I highly advised avoiding quarterbacks and wide receivers facing Carolina at all costs, but now we can relax. It's okay. Are we starting Derek Carr in regular leagues? Probably not. It's just your super flex there. But Chris Olave, full systems go. And for the remainder of the season, look at this Carolina defense through another lens and attack it all season long.
Yeah, if Derek Carr can actually pick them apart, then anyone can truly do it. I'm going to go with Kyler Murray, and you made some great points about him earlier. Kyler Murray averaged just 6.7 yards per attempt last season, which is not unusually good. None of the efficiency numbers looked great in his half season after returning from injury. Toss it out the window, though, because last year's Arizona offense is not this year's Arizona offense. We are dropping Marvin Harrison Jr. into a receiving room that had a glaring need for a number one. Plus, we still have Trey McBride in the mix and some excellent secondary receivers, supporting receivers. Murray is just a couple years removed from averaging a stellar 7.9 yards per attempt and over 270 passing yards per game. He put up those numbers basically the last time he had a quality receiving core, and he's got one again. He's finished as the QB3 overall at his best, and he's in the conversation, I think, to lead the position in scoring this season. We actually saw him kind of turn it around a little bit in the final 3 weeks last year when he was averaging well over 7 yards per attempt, led the Cardinals to a win over the Eagles. Not that everybody wasn't beating the Eagles, but he was pretty impressive at the back end of last season, and I think he's going to hit the ground running this year. Okay, give me one more Lion number.
I'm 100% on board with you on Kyler Murray. Let's see if you're on board with this one. It is Alvin Kamara. 694 rushing yards, 3.9 yards per carry. Those aren't very pretty, but remember, last year, while that was a very low number, those numbers absolutely lie. The man was RB5 in average points per game in half PPR, averaging 15 fantasy points per game. I feel like the fantasy community's general beef with Alvin Kamara, it confuses me just a tiny bit. Yeah, we're no longer getting the same Alvin Kamara of yesteryear, whose numbers were absolutely insane, but he's still an RB1, and we should treat him as such and have confidence in him. Yes, Taysom Hill is absolutely a vulture that drives us crazy, but Alvin Kamara is Alvin Kamara, and Derek Carr, we talked about him, is a check down king on that one. And Carolina defense that I just talked about, again, everything applies as well to this run game as well. So when we're looking at Carolina, you absolutely expect them to be gutted on the ground as they were last year. And again, this year, I'm picking on Carolina. I feel bad about it. It's not intentional. I like Deontay Johnson. We talked about him earlier, but this is a dream matchup for Alvin Kamara against Carolina.
It feels like it's okay to pick on Carolina at this point.
Also, I think we can expect a couple of Taysom Hill touchdowns this week.
I agree.
All right, let's turn to our fantasy game changers for this week. Powered by Ram Trucks, where we're identifying some of the most impactful players in one of the top fantasy matchups on the schedule. Should be a fun one. Sunday Night Football. We have Lions and Rams. Obviously, on this one, Detroit favored by 4.5. The over/under 52.5. So, as we look at our fantasy game changers, powered by Ram Trucks, Matt, who do you got?
Well, you could argue that this team in the LA Rams produced two of the biggest game changers from last season in Puka Nacua and Kyren Williams. And I have my eye on Kyren Williams' role here in week one. Are we going to get anything similar to the feature back workload that we saw from him on a per game basis last year? And even if we don't, does it matter? I mean, this guy was so good last year. The Rams offense as a whole was one of the best ecosystems in the NFL, especially from a rushing perspective, as they completely remade their identity under Kyren Williams and the man gap duo heavy blocking scheme that just produced one of the best fantasy seasons that we've seen come off the waiver wire. So is he going to hold down a feature role again? I kind of doubt it, but as long as the offensive line is healthy, which is a big question mark heading into the season, unfortunately, his role can be such, even with Corum mixing in, where he's still a running back one in fantasy, or at least that's what I'm thinking heading into this week.
So you like that running back. Andy Behrens, who do you like?
Yeah, very little fantasy buzz this season for David Montgomery because he's the old vet in the Lions backfield, right? He's not the fun, young, ascending star like Jahmyr Gibbs. But I regret to inform you that David Montgomery is, in fact, still around. He scored 13 touchdowns last year in 14 games. He ran for over 1,000 yards at better than 4.5 yards per carry. Montgomery also led all running backs in the NFL in carries inside the 5 and 10 yard lines. He's good. And when something works spectacularly for a team one year, we should not expect them to just run away from it the following season. Monty is going to remain a thing. And as Matt brought up earlier, this year's Rams defense is missing some key pieces from last year's Rams defense, right? Notably Aaron Donald. So the matchups certainly shouldn't scare you off. It wouldn't be at all surprising if Montgomery scored a couple times this week.
All right, Tara, save us from all this running back love that's happening. Give us somebody else that you've got your eye on.
I am giving you Jameson Williams in this fantastic matchup here. It's a matchup that we're all gushing over. I take start-sit questions on Yahoo's fantasy channels all throughout the week, and Jameson Williams has popped up over and over and over again, rightfully so. In this matchup, anyone and everyone is a viable start, and I truly mean that. I'll talk about it more later, but Jameson Williams is finally stepping into this wide receiver 2 role in Detroit. And while that might not seem like a high production part of the offense, because you're playing with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, we've talked about, but we are talking Jared Goff at home in the Dome. There is plenty of volume to go around. Jameson Williams is actually a flex for me this week.
All right, those are some of our locks. We'll continue to break all of it down, but it's time for maybe my favorite segment. We end the first half of the show running a little hurry-up offense, as we always love to do. You guys know the drill. We'll put your question up. We'll put a clock up. I will try and pin our experts in so they barely get an answer out. We get Aaron coming in first saying, for Sunday, half PPR, Metcalf, Singletary, or Ford. Tara, what do you think?
Despite the matchup, I'm still going with Metcalf on this one.
Look at that. See, she left us 15 seconds. Anything else you want to say?
There we go.
That's how it's done. I could have pinched her in.
Oh, gosh. I'm new here. I thought I was going for the fastest answer ever. Okay. Yes, 100% DK Metcalf. We talked about the matchup against Patrick Surtain here.
And then she gets whistled. That, you know what? That play, we're going to go back to the line of scrimmage. We'll get it here. All right. This one's going to go to Matt. All right. Matt, Villain502 asks you, Matt, should we go Purdy, Geno, Baker, or Cousins, and then politely puts hashtag AskFFL on there, which we really appreciate. What do you think, Matt Harmon?
I think you talk too much, Fitz, even if that is your job and you get paid per word, I do believe. I'm going Baker here. Great matchup against the Washington defense. It couldn't stop anything last year.
Look at that. See, that's expertly done by you. All right, Andy Behrens, Brian Robinson, or Joshua Palmer, half PPR, hashtag AskFFL from Free. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, I can't do it with the Chargers receiving core, not in week one. We don't exactly know how it's going to look. I'm going to go Brian Robinson here. I have full faith that he's going to get a significant workload.
That's all? I mean, I went super quick for you to give you all the time you can possibly need.
Very
You're
unfair.
wasting these seconds. You are wasting these seconds. We will snake our way back to Matt Harmon. Matt Harmon, Chuck Agazino asks, hashtag FFL ... Shakir Odunze McLaurin, question mark, half PPR. What do you think?
Oh, man, I really want to say Khalil Shakir here because I'm so nervous about Washington, rookie quarterback going against Todd Bowles' blitz-happy defense. You know what? I'm going to be bold as week one. Let's just throw Khalil Shakir out there. Why not?
I love it. Got it right in there. Terry, you having fun so far? Is this working out well for you? Okay, I'll ask you. Indie Sports Fan says, Tank Dell or Jerome Ford for my half PPR flex spot this week. Hashtag fantasy football. Hashtag fantasy help. Look at me leaving you 18 seconds.
Here we go. I got this. So while Jerome Ford, I feel like the floor is very solid with him this week. I got to lean into the upside of Tank Dell. I know we've got Stephon Diggs coming in there, Nico Collins, but CJ Stroud absolutely loves Tank Dell. I expect a touchdown here.
Well done. All right, Anthony Behrens, we go back to you for the next one. Talkin' Mets Podcast asks us on X with the hashtag AskFFL. Gus Edwards or Eckler? And remember, you know, we obviously here have a history with Eckler. So Gus Edwards or Eckler, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm on the Gus bus here. I definitely want Gus Edwards. He's like the one Charger that I feel fairly confident is going to see the ball plenty. Eckler's in a tough situation, probably running behind Brian Robinson.
The whistle. I mean, that's a delay game. All right. Eric Gray says Darnold or Levis Superflex. Good God, Matt Harmon. Darnold or Levis Superflex. What do you got?
Yeah, I refuse to be gaslit by the Sam Darnold oligarchs into thinking that this is anything for the Minnesota Vikings other than a kind of disaster that they're looking at starting Sam Darnold for 17 games now that JJ McCarthy's out of the mix here. And I'm especially nervous in week 1 because he's going against Dexter Lawrence and that ferocious defensive line. So give me Levis on this one.
Look at that. By the way, I blame Nate Tice for all of the Sam Darnold love that's happening everywhere. Our own Nate Tice. All right. Speaking of quarterbacks. Yeah, that's a good blame. Speaking of quarterbacks, I had the chance with Yahoo Sports to catch up with Josh Allen and ask the question that's on everybody's mind. How do you get past the Chiefs? Check out a little what he had to say.
We're very internally motivated here in Buffalo. And obviously the last couple of years, things haven't gone our way. And we're just trying to figure out a way to get over that hump. And Kansas City's been the pinnacle of what's going on in the age of football right now. And, we got to find a way to get it done. And I think that this entire offseason, there's been a lot of changes here in Buffalo and have a very young squad right now, but trust in the leadership of Coach McDermott and some of the vets that we have in this team, Von Miller, myself, and a few guys on the offensive line. On the defensive side, Terrell Bernard, who played some really good football for us last year, stepping up and really taking charge of that defense right now. So, it's all about playing together and playing well when it matters and trying to stay as healthy as possible. I think that's a big part of it too, that not a lot of people talk about in the NFL, but the teams that are healthy at the end are typically the teams that are win.
Let's take a look at some fantasy chatter. Some of the most talked about players in the newly redesigned fantasy app. Get out there, check it out. Sieg says with the CD Lamb, I don't think he'll do much the first week. Might bench him. Now, the next week, let's go. Switching him out for Tank Dell. That's a courageous decision. Kirk Cousins, Samuel says, Kirk Cousins turned Jordan Reed into a decent tight end. I salivate at what this man will do regarding Kyle Pitts. Have a good year, everyone. And then Jamar Chase. CM says, you drafted him in the first round. You take the risk and start him. Stop asking whether you should play Chase or Larry Lunchmeat. It's ridiculous. Depends on what kind of lunch meat it is. But I will throw this to you, Andy Behrens. Do you have any concern about Jamar Chase or Larry Lunchmeat?
I mean, I have the usual panic about a player who obviously has missed a bunch of time, and there are valid reasons to be worried, but it is one of those situations where you just have to kind of swallow that worry and go ahead and play him. Matt has talked about this plenty. Like, Jamar Chase is one of those guys who only needs 3 or 4 touches to have a massive impact on the game. So even if he's not playing every snap, it's not like he doesn't have a deep history with Joe Burrow. So I'm perfectly confident in Jamar Chase. I'm playing him every place I drafted him.
I mean, Tera, it's kind of fair on this too. Like, who else are they throwing to? If not Jamar, who else are we really scared of, right? It still feels like that has to be part of this conversation.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, our boy Andre Yoshevitz has now popped up into relevancy with T. Higgins being injured. And I'm so happy that Chase is going to play, and we don't have to sit here and contemplate is our wide receiver one, Yoshi, but I like him. But when we're looking at this, it's going to be very centrally focused on Jamar Chase. There might be some ancillary. We maybe see an uptick in volume to the running backs in terms of pass volume. So keep that in mind if you're maybe looking at these pass catchers.
All right, so obviously all eyes are on Sunday, but we know that leagues are also won on Monday night. And we've got a huge Monday night matchup coming this weekend as we get the Jets taking on the 49ers. A lot of conversation about both these teams. You want to talk about loud chatter around two organizations. We've seen it. The weather's going to be beautiful. The 49ers favored by 4. The over-under on this one, surprisingly low, 43.5. Tera, can the Jets produce any fantasy-relevant options in this one outside of Hall and Wilson?
Oh, I would love them to. You would think in an offense led by Aaron Rodgers that there would be more than 2 fantasy options. Yeah, maybe at some point, Mike Williams, if he can stay healthy, can become fantasy relevant. We can't trust him this week. It sounds like he might be a little bit limited, but maybe somewhere on down the line, a healthy Mike Williams with Aaron Rodgers could be a solid bench stash for us. I will say this as well, maybe tonight, as we're watching Mike Williams, maybe we keep an eye on Malachi Corley and see the type of usage that he gets. There's somebody who can provide some relative fantasy relevance in this offense. It's just figuring out who it is and whether or not they'll stay healthy.
It is stunning when you think about how long it's been since we've seen Aaron Rodgers throw a meaningful pass in an NFL game, but we'll see that. Andy, what do you have your mind on for this game?
Yeah, this is not some earth-shaking observation, but just hear me out. Garrett Wilson is really good, and I think probably underrated in fantasy. In his first 2 NFL seasons, the man overcame the worst quarterback situation in recent memory, finished with 1,000+ yards each year. If we get a healthy season from Aaron Rodgers, everything is on the table for Wilson, including, I think, the receiving triple crown, overall wide receiver 1 status in fantasy. Let's remember that when Rodgers picks a favorite receiver, he just absolutely wears that guy out. And you can think back on the best seasons from Davante Adams and Jordy Nelson. I think Wilson is in that class of player, just an uncoverable receiver, and I expect Rodgers to maximize his potential. We don't need Aaron Rodgers to be like the MVP version of himself. The 2022 version would be just a huge upgrade over anything Wilson has previously worked with.
So when we talk about this game, for me, the most important part of it on the 49ers side is actually somebody that can't earn you any fantasy points, but impacts everybody that does. Trent Williams. And whether or not the big guy can come in and just suddenly be Trent Williams is wildly significant. When we sit here and talk about Christian McCaffrey and whether or not he's 100% healthy, we talk about Brock Purdy, and you look at some of the splits and numbers on Brock when he takes any sort of a heat, and then you look at what that offensive line looks like without Trent Williams. I talked to George Kittle, and George Kittle was clear that the organization believes he's a first-time Hall of Famer, a first-ballot Hall of Famer that preps every day like that and is going to walk in and be absolutely the greatest version of himself. But I think that's asking a lot from a big boy up front. And if he's not everything he can be against this Jets defense in particular, this could turn into a nightmare for the 49ers. So even though he's not earning fantasy points, I'm a little scared of everything the 49ers are going to do without Trent Williams on the offensive side of the ball, without the best of Trent Williams, I should say, on the offensive side of the ball. Matt Harmon, what do you have your eye on?
Yeah, I'll talk about the other guy who came back pretty late here. Brandon Ayuk finally got that contract extension, put that drama to rest. I'm curious, obviously, what his role is going to be in this game where they've said he could potentially be on a snap count. He might be the guy that kind of gets sacrificed to Sauce Gardner deep down the field as the outside cover corner. He's like a wide receiver 3 for me this week. I actually have Debo ranked ahead of him. This is the type of matchup where Debo typically crushes, zone coverage, heavy defense underneath. But my overall point on Ayuk here is less about this week and more about, is there yet another level jump coming for this player? Because this is a guy, since he got out of Shanahan's doghouse in his second season, has gotten better every single season. He had his real true breakout year in 2022. Then 2023, he was one of the most efficient wide receivers in the NFL, led the NFL in yards per target. He was a 1,300-yard receiver despite not even seeing 120 targets. And in reception perception, he cleared the 90th percentile in success rate versus man, zone, and press coverage in 2023. That is territory truly reserved for elite wide receivers. It's only happened 9 times since I've been charting wide receivers since 2014. Davante Adams has done it. Justin Jefferson has done it twice. Steph Diggs did it twice. Antonio Brown did it twice. Michael Thomas, and now Brandon Ayuk in 2023. So could we see him, once he's fully integrated in this offense, jump up to the elite tier of wide receivers? I think it's very possible by the end of this season.
Well, this game is one of the many games we will get to pick as part of our Primetime Pick segment, which now, 37 minutes into the show, I get to remind you that I'm a defending champion. I didn't get a trophy. I didn't get a blue ribbon. I didn't get a belt. I don't know exactly what I got for this, but I'm certainly going to remind you every week that I am the defending champion of this. The way it works, it's a simple snake draft, and we're using the primetime games only. So we're using Cowboys-Browns, we're using Rams-Lions, and we're using 49ers versus Jets, a game we were just talking about. And through this process, we have to take a skill position player. You can only take one player from each game. Supposedly, our great producer, Dan, behind the scenes, says that he spun a wheel or took names. I don't know. He came up with it and says he has a video of it, but somehow I have the last pick. This is what I know. Matt Harmon somehow gets the first pick in this draft, which seems wildly unfair. It should have been Tera. But that's fine. That's fine, Matt. You get the first pick in the draft, and as such, anointed in this game that's obviously fixed. Who are you taking as your first pick?
Number one, disgusting behavior from you to besmirch the great Dan Harris, who has never been anything but just and fair. And in his very just and fair process, I've landed the number 1 overall pick. So again, just absolutely disgusting behavior by you, Fitz. Let's get that on the record. What else is disgusting is that I'm going to be a little bit of a coward here. I'm not going to take a banged up Christian McCaffrey. I'm going to go with Breece Hall, who, by the way, if he was the running back 1 this season, nobody would be surprised.
Okay, that's a great pick. By the way, I just wonder how much it cost you to get the first pick. All right, that's fine. It's fine. Tera, you are second on the clock, and this is your contest to win. So, who are you taking?
Matt got the first pick, but that's okay because I still would have taken Amon-Ra St. Brown first overall. Could be the most productive player in this matchup. I talked about Jared Goff earlier. When we get Goff in a dome, you absolutely want to target anyone and everyone, and Goff should pepper him with targets. Touchdowns should flow. He is my overall wide receiver 2 on the week. Amon-Ra St. Brown, perfect pick.
I'm stunned as we sit here with Christian McCaffrey still available and Andy Behrens on the clock. Andy, what would you like to do, good sir?
Well, what I'd really like to do is take Saquon Barkley. I believe he played in Primetime, if I'm not mistaken, but you probably won't allow me to do that. Yeah, I'll go ahead and take Christian McCaffrey. I'll take the best running back in football. It does sound like he's going to be good to go. He practiced all week, at least on a limited basis. Difficult matchup, but come on, he's Christian McCaffrey.
So you're telling me that I get all the way to the last pick in the first round and nobody's taking CD? Like CD is out here just living that life. Dak just got paid, and you're telling me CD's still available? I'm going to take that all day, every day, and I'm going to feel really good about it. And then on the turn, I'm going to sit here and tell you that I watch all of your shows on fantasy football, and I watched Andy Behrens tell everybody that Garrett Wilson had the chance to be the Triple Crown winner this year with most catches, most yards, and most touchdowns. That can start on Monday night. So yeah, I'm going on for I'm going Garrett Wilson as I come around the turn, and I'm sitting here wondering what the hell game you guys are playing, because I am kicking your butt. Andy Behrens, you're up next. Who do you want?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take Kyren Williams, one of the decisive players in fantasy last year, somebody who absolutely carried you down the closing stretch. It feels kind of, I don't know, 2010-ish of me to open this draft with running back, but man, you can't go wrong with either of these guys. I think Kyren, even if he has a slight Blake Corum problem this year, is still going to be the featured guy for the Rams.
I mean, you can't go wrong, but you might not have gone right. We'll see. Tara, who you taking next?
Do punt yards count on that one? I don't know. I am taking I'm taking Amari Cooper here. This is a strategic pick. Amari Cooper in this matchup. This is a tough matchup where it's hard to pick fantasy players from, and I actually am a little bit higher maybe on Amari Cooper than consensus this week. I think this is one of those matchups where we know Amari Cooper is literally the most boom bust player in the NFL, and this is a boom game for me. He gets to sleep in his home bed. He gets a nice matchup, and I feel like this is a good little bit, I mean, how many revenge games has he had, really? He tends to get those a lot, but here we go. A little bit revenge game for him in this matchup. A nice boom game for Amari Cooper.
Well, now we get Matt Harmon making 2 straight picks, my friend. Who do you got first?
Yeah, see, for all your crying at the top, Fitz, I'm in a terrible spot here because there are no more good players left in Cowboys-Browns. All the good players have been wiped off the board. There was only 2, so tough break for me. In Sunday Night Football, though, I am going to go with Cooper Kupp. I've got him ranked a little bit ahead of Puka Nacua this week just because he is, shockingly enough, the healthier player right now between the two of them. He's got great chemistry with Matthew Stafford, and this should be a game where points are plenty. I think he's going to lead this team in targets here in week number 1 against the Lions secondary that's improved on the outside. Nickel is still, a bit of a position of flux depending on where their second-year defensive back is going to play. I will go, in this Cowboys-Browns game, I guess I'll go with Jerome Ford. He's probably going to touch the ball more than any of the Cowboys running back committee bros there, Rico Dowdle, Zeke Elliott. So, again, for all of your little tiers at the top, Fits, I ended up having a terrible draft. So congratulations.
I mean, you could anticipate who's going to be left in what matchup, but that's fine. It's fine. All right, Tara, now that whining Matt is done, who would you like to take?
I've got one game left, is San Francisco, New York Jets game, and I'm taking Deebo Samuel on this one. We talked about Brandon Ayuk being limited in this game. We might see a nice uptick of targets here for Deebo. Difficult matchup here, but I really do like the boom potential for him, especially when he could also provide that fantasy value on the ground. So Deebo Samuel is my last pick here.
All right, Andy Behrens, who do you got?
Look at me out here playing 4-dimensional chess, saving this Browns-Cowboys game for my last pick because I wanted to take the steal of the draft. Brandon Cooks. Give me Brandon Cooks. I agree with Matt. I don't want any part of that Cowboys backfield. Cooks, last year, 8 touchdown receptions over his final 12 games. He actually finished the season over the second half as a wide receiver, too, for fantasy purposes. Kind of quietly, but he was scoring every week. So give me Cooks. Again, absolute steal of the draft. Brilliant move by me.
I have the last pick as I clean this thing up. And here's the thing. There are plenty of dynamic players available, but I'm petty. So the last pick in this draft is certainly going to be a petty one. I'm going to walk up and I'm going to take Sam Laporta. And the whole time I turn the card in, I'm just going to stare at Andy Behrens, because I know his love affair with Laporta. So I'm handing the card in and I'm just giving you side eye the entire way, because now your guy is going to be the person that beats you in this matchup this week. That's it. And you did this to yourself. You could have taken him off the board, but no, that's fine. It's fine. I'm going to beat you with your guy, Andy. I don't know.
How are there
just so
two
that's
Iowa tight ends here, and I passed on both of them? It's outrageous. I deserve the loss.
That's fair. All right, we will keep you updated on the standings, obviously, especially if I'm in first place. If I'm not, I don't know. We might just skip this whole segment in future weeks, but we'll see how it played out as we do this every single week. In the meantime, Andy, Matt, let's have a little bit of fantasy face-off fun. Take it away, boys.
Yeah, first fantasy face-off of the season involves Caleb Williams, Hard Knock star, the greatest quarterback in Chicago Bears history. He's about to play his first NFL game. He's opening the year at home against a Tennessee defense that ranked mid-pack against the pass last season, almost never turned anyone over. It is not a terrible spot for Caleb. I cannot be completely objective about this because I'm just that excited about Caleb Williams' prospects. So we are turning to you to make all these judgment calls on Caleb Williams basically versus the field. Please note, by the way, that the stats that you are going to see on the screen, they are projections. Nothing has happened yet. Let's talk about the two big name rookies, Caleb versus Jaden Daniels, who gets I think a tougher matchup at Tampa Bay this week against a veteran defense that actually will turn you over.
Yeah, I have never been known to be biased, and I'm only a bastion of fairness and justice. So it's a good thing I'm here to help you out, Andy Behrens. And I have to say, though, I'm going to go with Caleb Williams in this spot. I know that Jaden Daniels has the rushing floor and the rushing ceiling. At the same time, man, I have little to no confidence in Cliff Kingsbury to design an offense that is going to exploit Jaden Daniels' passing talents, especially down the field. If you watch the preseason, and I get it, sometimes preseason is not an indicator of what's going to happen in the real games, but that looked an awful lot like the horizontal raid that we left behind in Arizona when Cliff Kingsbury was the play caller there. So this is a Todd Bowles defense that throws the kitchen sink at young quarterbacks. And by the way, this is not a good pass protection offensive line, and it's a skill position room that has Terry McLaurin, and then I'm not that excited about anyone else here. So yeah, give me Caleb Williams with all the weapons in Chicago.
Yeah, good points by you. Difficult matchup for him. I would obviously lean Caleb as well, but I'm going to lean Caleb all over the place here. How about a more proven quarterback and one in a pretty friendly matchup, Jared Goff or Caleb Williams?
Yeah, this one I'm going with Jared Goff here. As exciting as Caleb Williams is, and as Jared Goff is, we know what Jared Goff is. It's pretty great from a production standpoint. And I almost kind of I want to stand up for Jared Goff here at this point, man. People kind of put him in the Kirk Cousins zone, the Brock Purdy zone. And again, Brock Purdy's probably a guy who needs a little bit more respect, but Jared Goff is a good quarterback. He's in a good system. He can push the ball down the field. He doesn't have some weak little arm or anything, and he's a good quarterback pre-snap and I think a little bit more post-snap at this point of his career than he has been earlier. And again, from a pure fantasy perspective, this is probably the highest scoring game on the slate. It's against a bad defense with good players he's throwing the ball to. So this one is Jared Goff here pretty convincingly to me.
Yeah, and honestly, the Kirk Cousins zone is not a bad zone. That zone pays pretty well, for one thing, and it produces numbers, right? I agree with you on Goff there. It's not my official call on Caleb versus Jared Goff, but I understand. Let's talk about two former number one picks. How about Caleb Williams or Trevor Lawrence, coming off a disappointing season, but we know there's pretty significant fantasy upside there.
Yeah, it felt like you and I discussed Trevor Lawrence on the Panic Meter podcast last year, probably every other week, if not every week, Andy Behrens. And weirdly enough, for all of that panic, Trevor Lawrence still ended up being the QB 12 last year or around that zone. He was near a quarterback one. That being said, I'm a little bit wait and see mode with this offense. The skill position group, like how quickly is Brian Thomas Jr. going to be able to lift this offense? I think it will happen at some point this year, but is it right away in week one? I'm not so sure about that, even though he was a player I drafted a lot. With Trevor Lawrence himself, who's calling plays here? Is it Doug Peterson taking more of the reins back? Because I think that needs to happen after after the Press Taylor experience last season. So I will go with Caleb Williams in this one, in a good matchup with all of those players there. Typically I want to temper expectations from rookie quarterbacks. I'd love to temper your expectations personally, Andy Behrens, but I'm pretty darn excited about Caleb Williams this week and going forward.
Yeah, it won't surprise you that I am as well. It's wild that we have more questions at this stage about Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars offense than we do the Bears offense, but I think I agree with you. I think that's where we are. All right, let's send it to Fitz and Tera for some fantasy flyers.
Yes, and by the way, in the future, if we don't get Matt vaunted as bastion of fairness and justice, I wrote that down. That was beautifully said by him. All right, so Tera, let's talk some fantasy flyers. Somebody you're taking a flyer on this weekend that you've got your eye on. Who are you thinking?
Fantasy flyers are my favorite thing. And my first favorite fantasy flyer is Brian Thomas. I feel like I've talked about him 5,000 times over this week. So I hope that it pays off, but I've got a lot of conviction in him. Brian Thomas may be lower ranked than our other top rookies like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors and now Xavier Worthy as well. But he is in line for a breakout in week 1. He is poised to step into Calvin Ridley's old role. And I feel like sometimes people kind of look at that production that Calvin Ridley had and they undersell it, because we had such high expectations in terms of what we expected for Calvin Ridley. But if Brian Thomas puts out the same type of production as Calvin Ridley, we will absolutely be playing him on a weekly basis and in love with the production that he gives. I think that he can match that production and can easily outperform his wide receiver, 42-ish wide receiver, low 40s range that he is right now in rankings. The Jags matchup against the Dolphins is expected to be a very high-scoring game. The Jags are going to have to push pass volume to keep up. Trevor is going to be checking them all, and Brian Thomas could absolutely be the wide receiver 1 this week and deliver a huge performance for the Jags. He is absolutely worth the risk.
Are you a believer at this point? Because we just heard the guys talking about Trevor Lawrence going into this season. Are you a believer that Trevor is a quarterback that you can trust from a fantasy standpoint?
I am a Clemson grad. I've been a believer in Trevor for quite some time now. I do expect a little bounce back year from him. Last year was disappointing, but again, in this offense, a little uptick in new weapons. I think things are going to be shaked up a little bit, and I'm trusting him to have a bounce back season here where he outperforms mild expectations. Coming in.
Let's also acknowledge the high ankle sprain was a big part of last year. Give me somebody else that you've got your eye on that's a flyer for you.
Oh, this one might have people squinting their eyes at me and a little bit confused, but trust me and go with me on this in deeper leagues. Demarcus Robinson is absolutely a fantasy flyer. I spent the latter half of last season begging people to flex him. And while I'm not telling you gotta flex in week 1 because you can kind of wait it out and see if you need to turn to him, if you are strapped and you're in a deep league, this is one that I would absolutely turn to. I mentioned earlier that everyone in this matchup for Detroit and LA is fair game. And taking a flyer on Demarcus Robinson is 100% included in that. He's been very reliable since the Rams moved on from Van Jefferson. Robinson's role gradually expanded last year. He had high snap counts, high production, scored a touchdown in 4 consecutive games at the end of last season, double-digit fantasy points in 5 straight outings, actually, all with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp active. The wide receiver 3 in the Rams offense is very fantasy relevant because of the formations that they run. And in this matchup against Detroit, yeah, these points are flying. And if you need to turn here, you need to take a flyer on Demarcus Robinson, do it.
All right, so let's bring the boys back in. It's time. We're going to get back to the hurry-up offense. You guys know the drill. You've given us questions. We're going to read it to everybody. We're going to see how we do at the end of the second half here. And we go from M is our first person. Preseason, this is a long one. Good Lord. Preseason favorite here. They haven't even started the clock. I just feel, oh, there we go. Preseason favorite here. Guess who's going to get this question? In a 10-team PPR. I have DK versus Pat Surtain this week, so I don't know if I should start him for Ladd McConkey versus the Raiders or sit Najee Harris and use Ladd in the flex. Hashtag AskFFL. Harmon, what do you think?
I mean, my God, we're not coming in here week 1 sitting DK Metcalf for Ladd McConkey, who I like over the long term, and I still also would play Harris in the flex over Ladd.
That was well done, man. Harmon's bringing midseason form to the hurry-up offense. Kaz, Pippin, Sippin, I don't know. 14T half PPR. Do you trust Charbonnet, Algier, Schultz, or Adonai Mitchell? Ask FFL. What do you think as I butchered that entire question, Andy Behrens?
Yeah. Do I trust any of them? No, I don't trust any of them. But I think the one I would actually play here, if I'm picking one, is A.D. Mitchell. He's in a great situation in what should be a shootout of a game, and no Josh Downs this week either. That means additional targets for him.
All right, Tara, the next one is coming to you. Oh, look at that. I don't plan these questions, Harmon. I don't know what's going on this week. Tyler says Neighbors or Amari Cooper, PPR. What do you think?
Oh, making me choose on this one. Amari Cooper was my pick in PPR, but if you want risky, go with Amari Cooper. But the safest pick here is absolutely going to be Malik Neighbors. You're going to have the volume here. The targets are going to be there. The yardage is going to be there. Go with the high volume play in PPR with Neighbors.
That was a deep, in-depth, nice answer. Well done. Justin comes in and says, I have AR and Tua, but going up against Tyreek, do I still start AR if I like him more or cancel the points with Tua? Harmon, easy one. What do you got?
Wow, I actually get 20 seconds. Maybe I can have some really good analysis here, although now I've wasted the time, so, I've just banged myself on this one. But, no, you go with the higher-ranked player. Don't try to do the reverse psychology, canceling points thing. And with the rushing floor that Richardson brings, he is still your play over Tua.
Look, that is well done. I mean, you got your trash talk in and you got the answer in all at once. That is spectacular work. Killaz says Mayfield or Dak just for week 1. Andy Behrens, what do you think?
Obviously, Baker Mayfield has a friendly matchup here against that Washington defense. I get it. I'm still playing Dak Prescott. I mean, there has to be a line with Baker somewhere, and for me, it's here. Dak Prescott in any given week can give you 300 plus yards. He's had a couple weeks with CeeDee Lamb. I feel good about it. I'm definitely playing him.
And by the way, again, Dak got paid this morning. He's going to be playing like a man that is just absolutely wealthy beyond any imagination. Generational talent, that's humble, comes in and says, Jerome Ford, Kyle Pitts, or JSN PPR. What do you think, Tara?
Man, this one might be a little controversial here because the safe option is definitely Jerome Ford if you want that nice safe floor. But I kind of like JSN this week in PPR. We talked about the Tyler Lockett injury earlier. Maybe he's a little bit limited and JSN can get a higher volume target share than he saw last year. But we also have to consider that this is a brand new offense, and we know that JSN is going to be featured a little bit more here. So in week 1, with Lockett dealing with the injury, take the risk here and go with JSN for the upside.
Look at all that time. Oh, you know what? Harmon, another good one for you. Calendar butt. Singletary or Stevenson, PPR. What do you think?
I just can't get myself excited about Devin Singletary on the Giants offense. By the way, wearing those uniforms that they're wearing today. Yeesh. So I just listen. It's the Giants offense. We know who Devin Singletary is, solid player, but he's been productive on good offenses. I don't think this is going to be a good offense. I'm not that jazzed up about the Patriots, but Ramondre is a significantly better player in a very good matchup.
Harmon has every right to critique those uniforms because he's got the third button unbuttoned today, which is just he's showing that sex. So like he has that opportunity. Esper said. I just showing that sex. That's where we are at this point. All right, Esper says one of my leagues is a wait and see running back 2, but for week 1, Warren, Dowdle, or Dobbins have PPR. What do you think, Andy?
Oh man, an Arthur Smith running back, one of the 3 various options in Dallas, or J.K. Dobbins. This is a tough one. I think I'd actually play J.K. Dobbins here.
That's a spectacular recovery from where the show was going. Mongoose McQueen, should I flex Metcalf or Kamara, or should I start Metcalf over Olave? What do you think, Tara?
Yeah, we talked about Metcalf earlier in this matchup here. While he's not a must avoid and fade this week, when I'm looking at the options of playing Alvin Kamara and Chris Olave, I did talk a lot about that Carolina defense earlier. This is going to be a high volume game, good ground game for Alvin Kamara, and so I would go Kamara and Olave.
Okay, and then we go back to Harmon, who still has that button unbuttoned. Shannon says, pick 2 in a 1-point PPR league. James Cook, DJ Moore, and Jahmyr Gibbs. What do you got, Big Sexy?
Oh, man, these are such great options. I might have to take a 4th button down. Man, I got to go with James Cook. Great matchup. They utilized him so well in the pass game last year. So DJ Moore versus Jahmyr Gibbs is tough. But again, crowded receiver room, Chicago. I will go with Jahmyr Gibbs coming off an injury. Risky, but still.
Andy Behrens will get the next one. Well done getting that in. Dustin Stone says, love being my quarterback. Better pick up Purdy or Goff? Love being my quarterback. Oh, I see how we read that. What do you think, Andy Behrens?
Yeah, we haven't really talked about the Jordan Love situation. These are great options. Like it's incredible that these are your two options as a potential 2-3 week replacement for Jordan Love. I'd go Jared Goff any given week. That offense is just too good. He can give you 300 passing yards, a couple of touchdowns.
All right, let's get one more in as we get one more here for Tera. Pedro St. Murillo, I don't know, Singletary or Joshua Palmer and flex, or should I bench Ayuk for Palmer and flex Singletary? What do you think, Tera?
Oh, you gave me the hardest one. Oh, okay. Singletary. I know that Matt said that he does not like the Giants uniforms and it's just uninspiring, but I do like Singletary this week. It's okay to flex him. I'm sorry, Matt. I'm okay with it. It's safe.
You know what? They're saying in my ear we have time for one more. So that means Matt Harmon, our MVP today. Jeremy Manning, need one PPR. Zach Moss, Dunze, or Ridley. What do you think?
Man, I'm going to go away from uncertainty here because I'm not quite certain how that Bengals backfield is going to play out. I'm not quite certain what role Rome Odunze is going to have in his first start behind Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. I am certain that Calvin Ridley, with Hopkins coming off an injury, is the #1 receiver in Tennessee for an aggressive quarterback. Start him.
I'm certain that if you're just tuning in, we're now twice a week. Every single Thursday, 7:30 p.m. before Thursday Night Football, you can catch us hanging out with you for 30 minutes. And every Sunday, noon Eastern, to help you perfect your fantasy football lineup. We will be here every single week. She's Tera Roberts. He's Matt Harmon. He's Andy Behrens. I'm Jason Fitz. Thanks for watching Fantasy Football Live, presented by Ram Trucks. Come back. See us again next week.